News alert, the Senate is preparing to meet later today for the first time since the death of Arizona Senator John McCain. We expect an outpouring of tributes from both sides of the aisle. McCain, the Republican lawmaker known as the Maverick, served in the Senate for more than 3 decades and is also remembered as a war hero for his time in captivity as a POW in Vietnam. Now we're learning details on plans for memorial services. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with more. Mike?
Molly, good afternoon to you. Folks in his home state of Arizona will get to pay their respects first before the focus shifts here to Washington. Senator John McCain will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda on Friday before a private ceremony that morning. On Saturday, a national memorial service will be held at the National Cathedral with family, friends, congressional colleagues, staff, and some world leaders invited. Then on Sunday, a private memorial service will take place at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, where McCain will be laid to rest next to his Naval Academy classmate and lifelong friend. A Senate Democrat reflected today on McCain's impact in trying to find common ground with others.
That's one of the biggest lasting legacies of Senator McCain, was that he never stopped trying to find ways to work with people, even if they'd been opponents. That tireless work to bridge divides was one of the things that most impressed me about this great man.
McCain was elected to Congress back in 1982. He had served in the United States Senate since 1987, more than 30 years. And many senators are talking about McCain's role as a mentor and his leadership on foreign policy issues in particular.
It is hard to fill the void. Without any question, John McCain believed in American exceptionalism. He used that perch, the perch of American exceptionalism, to challenge his fellow senators to look beyond themselves and to look into the future and to make sure that we were designing a country that would be better for the next generation of Americans than it was for the current generation of Americans.
You can expect plenty more praise for the life and legacy of Senator John McCain when the Senate gavels back into session at 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. Molly?
Mike Emanuel, thank you. We will be watching. Growing questions about what's next in Washington after the loss of Senator John McCain, who was a towering presence on Capitol Hill. Former Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte recalling how McCain was able to work across party lines. Watch.
He just had the courage of his convictions, and he really was a true bipartisan champion, someone who was focused on getting things done for the American people, and he had that political courage.
Meantime, the Washington Post reporting that McCain's passing marks a new era for congressional checks on President Trump. The Post noting that McCain was a frequent critic of the president while heading the Senate Armed Services Committee, which will now be chaired by Senator James Inhofe, a Trump supporter, and Senator James Risch will take the Republican leadership post in the new Senate Foreign Relations Committee when frequent Trump critic Senator Bob Corker steps down at the end of the year. The Post writes that this all makes for, quote, a sweeping change in how Congress may use its oversight authority to check the president's international agenda, according to current and former lawmakers, lobbyists, and policy watchers. A changing of the guard with potentially enormous consequences for holding the president to account during crisis. Larry, I want to start with you, of course, because you're here in the middle and you're in the hot seat. Does the Washington Post have a point here when they raise that what's happening there in Congress, some of the leadership may be a bit more friendly to the president now going forward?
You know, Molly, what I'm seeing here is a parade of hypocrites. The praise that's coming out for John McCain, of course, is well-deserved. But where were these people praising his bipartisanship when he needed it in 2008 when he was running for president? The Washington Post admitted that they had more stories of Obama on the front page, more flattering stories of Obama, more photographs of Obama, more flattering photographs of Obama than McCain. The New York Times wrote a flattering editorial just the other day about John McCain, said we could use more men like him. Well, 2008, the New York Times in Obama for President had an editorial, and it said that John McCain's campaign is run based on, quote, class warfare, partisan divide, and even hints of racism, end of quote. Where were they then? This is just outrageous the way they treated him in 2008. Now, all of a sudden, he's this saint.
You know, you talk about the run to 2008. It's not easy to run for president, and there are some moments where Senator McCain certainly showed enormous class. The most notable one that's been replayed here since his death is when someone accused the president of being an Arab, and he immediately snagged that microphone in the midst of a town hall, even got a few boos, defending his competitor there in that process, and it was a very competitive race. Those people in politics that can act there in that moment, who can step into that place right now? Katie?
That's the big question. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey has a big decision to make. There's been a couple of names floated around. One of them is Ducey's Chief of Staff, Kirk Adams. He is a former state representative or former state speaker. He's 45 years old. He's young. Former Senator Jon Kyl, who I actually interned for in college, I will say, being from Arizona, has been floated as well as a temporary solution to the vacancy. The appointment will not be made until Senator McCain is buried, so at least until next week, and the appointment will be until 2020 when they will hold a special election. So they've actually held the names of who may take the seat very closely. There could be someone who you haven't heard of who may be appointed, so we'll just have to see how it goes.
His wife Cindy has also been.
His wife has been floated as well. But just on a personal note, I remember after he ran for president and lost in 2008, being a journalism student and covering and going to some of his rallies in Arizona when he was running for re-election in the Senate, when Sarah Palin was still campaigning for him. And it was just really interesting to see how he was also treated in the media, and it was so different than what we're seeing now. But it certainly is an end of an era in Arizona, and a lot of people agreed with his policies. A lot of people did not, but everyone is able to put those things aside and respect his service to the country and the things that he has done.
Let's just say that no one can and will fill John McCain's shoes.
Irreplaceable.
There's only one John McCain.
Right.
But the suggestion or the smell wafting off of some of these articles seems to say that that kind of greatness in a different way doesn't exist in other women or men. And I patently reject that.
Right, I agree.
That there are going to be different people. Because words fail me often. I'll quote the Wall Street Journal today. Gordon Lubold wrote this article, and he said, as a third-generation naval officer and his detention in Vietnam, Mr. McCain had the moral authority and stature to question the executive branch, the Pentagon, and its top military officers in a way few others are able and willing to do. And I thought that summed it up. But there are other people who will challenge the status quo, challenge the swamp. Yeah. And I reject that anybody taking these jobs is automatically in the bag for Trump.
It's also beyond just challenging the swamp. I mean, this is a man who served the country honorably, who did something in captivity that I'm not sure I know that many people who would have made it there. I think it was 5.5 years. No,
but I was addressing that article in the Washington Post about who's taken over the Senate.
I understand. I was saying there's just so much more to this legacy and the way that it's being discussed. The idea of service comes into play here because we don't have as many people serving in government necessarily who have served in our armed services. And I just want to point that obviously we're all thinking of the McCain family right now as we're even discussing this. And I think that Governor Ducey has played this properly. And first of all, pushing aside anyone who months ago started talking about wanting his seat, saying you are immediately out of the running if you are even discussing that. And the most recent reports are that Cindy McCain will not be the one getting the seat, and it will be someone who's served.
And of course, ultimately, we have a week here ahead where we'll be remembering Senator McCain as irreplaceable, even as these discussions
go on. The president can muster some kind words for him at some point soon. That would be appreciated.
We need to move on. After the shooting at an online video game tournament in Jacksonville, Florida left 3 dead, 9 wounded. Top Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Dick Durbin wasting no time, demanding Congress take action on gun reform. Are they politicizing tragedy, and are they doing it too soon?